It's another hurricane season, and Texans are once again facing flooding, dangerous winds, and no power.
We have so much infrastructure that should have been protected for decades, and this county chose not to exert any political will.
The frustration of recovery and the politics between leadership as people suffer under triple-digit heat.
So there's millions and millions of people every year who need legal help and are not going to be able to get it.
The cost of representation is too great for many Texans. An in-depth look at one program, a Texas Supreme Court justice's work to expand it, and who are forced to be their own lawyer.
The subtext here will probably overwhelm the actual text of the speech, I suspect.
President Joe Biden is heading to Texas. Another chance for him to show the country he should stay in the race, as his own party members have concerns of his ability to win this November.
Produced from the Capitol in Austin and airing statewide, this is the award-winning State of Texas.
Hello and thank you for joining us. I'm Josh Hinkle. This week, millions faced scorching heat, all without power when Hurricane Beryl ripped through southeast Texas. And for Houston, the fourth largest city in the country, hurricanes are a constant disaster that loom every year. Ryan Chandler talked to those who say even though they've seen this so many times, it does not get easier.
We went through, I believe, Carla, where the whole area was flooded. Katrina and Ike in 2008, then Harvey in 2017.
At 92, Gladys Goffney isn't fazed much by the latest hurricane, but it never gets easier.
You never recover from these storms. You know, there's just no way to recover because they come so frequently.
This time, Beryl claimed her backyard.
Nothing to see but just a whole bunch of trees down.
And dropped a 60-foot tree on the garage, the same kind that has killed Houstonians in other homes. After the second major disaster in as many months, Gladys and millions of others grow wary.
It just put you back to where you were. You know, you thought you were cleaned up. You know, it kind of breaks your spirit.
Smaller cities are sending their electric crews, and overheating locals resort to public cooling centers while private companies try to restore their power. Too many woes for a world-class city, some local leaders say.
We have so much infrastructure that should have been protected for decades, and this county chose not to exert any political will.
Houston's disaster preparation has long been a point of contention. 7 years after Harvey, flood mitigation remains a top priority. With 2 months left in a hyperactive hurricane season, Houstonians rake up the wreckage, but won't let down their guards.
You know, it's just kind of remaking yourself all the time. But keep smiling.
Ryan Chandler is here with us. You spent most of the week covering the damage left behind from Beryl. We saw what people were facing. What's happening to bring those people relief?
Well, too little, too late. I think that's how Houstonians would put it. All eyes are on Centerpoint Energy right now. That's the largest electric provider around the Houston area. And as of Friday, there are still 850,000 people on day 5 without power as heat has reached up into 105 degrees. That is down from over 2 million people that were originally knocked out. Centerpoint says that they've had 12,000 workers on the front lines trying to get power restored, working day and night. But they intend to have 80% of people restored by Sunday. That means thousands and thousands of people will be going into a week without power after they pass that mark. Meanwhile, there has been a state, federal, and local response to try and just triage these people while they deal with this heat. Local governments have been opening cooling centers for people that don't have anywhere else to go. They opened a field hospital in NRG, the Houston Texans Stadium, with 250 beds in order to make up for a hospital shortage. They can't send people home to places without air conditioning if they need power. Austin has sent their own electric providers to try and send backup. Even Dallas has been sending police officers to augment Houston police. So we're just seeing cascading effects when so many people lose power. It's not just about air conditioning, which is more of a necessity than a luxury now. It really puts a strain on so many city resources that the state from all over has been trying to help
Well, you know, state leaders are now calling for accountability for Centerpoint. Dan Patrick is calling for an investigation and says the Texas will hold them accountable.
Yes, he says the Texas Senate is going to look into their conduct both before and after the storm. He asked at a press conference on Thursday, were they prepared? He expects that they underestimated the storm and underprepared, didn't have enough line workers ready to go, didn't have enough trucks stationed before the storm hit. So he thinks that they may have cut corners in order to save money and didn't respond to this as quickly as they could have. He said on Thursday they need to get their rear ends in gear, and there will, of course, be, I'm sure, hearings and investigations into how Centerpoint will do this in the future. But for now, all their focus is on getting the power back on to the people who still need it.
As recovery started, a political fight really played out between Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, President Joe Biden, and Governor Greg Abbott, who was overseas when Beryl made landfall, right?
Of course, there's politics underpinning all of this, and we're starting to see as the frustration grows, so does the finger pointing. Dan Patrick was adamant that reporting from the Houston Chronicle that accused the state of delaying aid or not acting quickly enough was inaccurate. The President of the United States called into the Houston Chronicle shortly after the storm and said that he was trying to track down the governor and acting Governor Patrick and just couldn't find them because they need to make a request for a disaster declaration to FEMA in order for the federal government to send in things like generators, food, water. And the reporting there was that usually that's done before the storm. It wasn't done until the day after this time. Now, Patrick was adamant to say that that is untrue, that they had processes and federal law to follow when you're dealing with the bureaucracy of this situation. But without getting into all of the complexities of how that works and FEMA regulations, there are political accusations being made both from the White House and from the Texas Capitol about who is responsible for slowing this delay. And in fact, the state says there was no delay. They did everything as quickly as they could. But we're going to see a lot more finger pointing and blame shifting as the frustration grows in Houston.
All right, Ryan, thank you, and great job out there. I'm glad you stayed safe.
Thank you.
President Joe Biden is heading to Texas. He's set to deliver remarks Monday at the LBJ Presidential Library in Austin. It will mark the 60th anniversary of the Civil Rights Act. It comes as reports are emerging of powerful figures in the Democratic Party putting pressure on the president to withdraw from the race. Among them, reportedly, is former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. The Hill spoke with Democratic lawmakers who say she is concerned about Biden's ability to win in November. The spotlight will be on the president ahead of his visit to Texas. Our Monica Madden sat down with Jim Henson, director of the Texas Politics Project at UT Austin, to get a better look at what to expect this election season.
We know that President Joe Biden is coming to Austin on Monday to give a civil rights speech at the LBJ Library. His visit on Monday, though, coincides with the start of the RNC convention in Milwaukee. What kind of message do you think Biden is hoping to convey from the Lone Star State Monday?
Well, I mean, I think there are two things going on here. There's the thing itself, which will be, a vigorous defense of Democratic commitments and Joe Biden's commitment to civil rights and voting rights. They're celebrating the anniversary of big voting rights legislation passed by LBJ. The underlying message will be Joe Biden is a competent candidate. He's here, he's forceful. People should stop talking about removing him. So as with all Joe Biden events now, the subtext here will probably overwhelm the actual text of the speech, I suspect.
The president's visit comes after calls for him to drop out of the race, most notably Congressman Lloyd Doggett of Austin, the first Democratic congressman to call for Biden to bow out of the race. Do you expect this to be an issue that we continue to hear, in the lead up to the election in November?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that this issue is not going to go away for Joe Biden. As I was saying, that is going to be hovering very prominently over this visit to Texas. And, that's the essence of the problem that Joe Biden has. The debate performance reinforced doubts that were pre-existing in Texas, nationally, and including among Democrats. And that's not going away. I don't think anything is going to make that go away, frankly, at this point.
It's a collection of extreme MAGA ideas.
Project 2025, an overhaul of the federal government, who's behind the plan, and why it's dominating election headlines.
You follow the law, you follow the rules, you wait in line.
Treat people in a humane way, but that also, and sometimes will have to be tough.
The race for Senate. The two men trying to win your vote for the seat this November shared their thoughts over the border and migration. One of the top issues dominating this election year is border security. My colleague Daniel Marin recently held a pair of in-depth conversations with the U.S. Senate candidates in Texas, Republican Senator Ted Cruz and Democratic Congressman Colin Allred. It culminated in a one-hour Senate race special ranging in topics from the economy to reproductive rights. Today, we want to showcase part of the conversation centered around border security. We start with Senator Cruz, followed by Representative Allred.
Things like building the border wall, reinstating that, also reinstating the Remain in Mexico policy you've said. So how would you balance all of those with the needs and contributions of the immigrant community in Texas?
There's a right way to come to this country. You follow the law, you follow the rules, you wait in line, you come legally. And I will say what's happening at our southern border, it is a crisis unlike any we've seen in the history of our country. I spend a lot of time down there. It has never been remotely this bad. We've had over 11 million illegal immigrants cross into this border illegally. And you ask, how do you fix it? You know what's frustrating? This crisis is man-made, and it is Joe Biden and Colin Allred and the Democrats that created this crisis. Why is that? Because when Biden came into office, he inherited a border that was largely secure. He inherited the lowest rate of illegal immigration in 45 years. I had worked hand in hand with President Trump, and we had largely secured the border. We'd achieved incredible victories securing the border. All Biden had to do was nothing. Just don't screw it up. But instead, what did he do? He came in and he deliberately broke the border. It was 3 decisions he made, and they were all unilateral executive decisions. Number 1, you rightly noted, he halted building the border wall. Did that on the first day in office. Number 2, he reinstated the disastrous policy of catch and release. So now that we apprehend people here illegally, they let them go. And number 3, he pulled out of the unbelievably successful Remain in Mexico agreement. Remain in Mexico is how we'd gotten the lowest rate of illegal immigration in 45 years. The result of that, the numbers exploded. And they didn't do so gradually over 6 months, they happened overnight. We went from the lowest rate in 45 years to the highest rate in the history of our country. All of that is deliberate. The good news, though, because it was done by unilateral executive action, it can be undone by unilateral executive action.
In a recent poll, Texas voters identified border security as the most important issue facing the state right now, followed closely by immigration, hand in hand. You have a new ad touting that you stood up to President Biden when it comes to the border. Back in January, you were one of 3 Texas Democrats who supported a resolution to condemn President Biden's handling of the southern border. I guess just kind of walk us through your evolution of thought on this. You now support the president's executive orders that came out recently. What do you say for folks who see the ad as maybe some kind of flip-flop on the issue?
What we have seen is that we've had a change to where in the last month of December of 23, we had a record number of crossings, 300,000 in a month. I think that's around the same as we had in the last year of the Obama presidency. The facts on the ground have changed. We do have a crisis at the border. Venezuela is in collapse. We've seen millions of Venezuelans fleeing Venezuela. We've seen what's happening in Haiti in terms of the gang violence that's forcing so many Haitians out of Haiti. We know what's still happening in the northern triangle countries, and this is also a global phenomenon that countries all over the world are facing. And so it requires a response. We have to respond with smart policy. And this is where I get really frustrated because I see Ted Cruz with a bipartisan effort in the United States Senate to bring billions of dollars to this issue for more immigration judges, for more Border Patrol agents, for more administrative personnel, to help secure the border as well, and also changing the standard on the asylum process, which is already, I think, causing and exacerbating the problem that we're having. And he says no to that, and I support it, but he's saying no. And he's saying no, and he's also at the same time admitting that he's worried that if he does that, it's going to impact the elections in November. And what he's saying when he's saying that is, I don't want to fix the problem because I want to run on the problem. And that to me has to be so outrageous to every single Texan.
The full 1-hour edition of Campaign Context is online in its entirety. Look for it on our website in this week's State of Texas story.
Think tanks do think tank stuff. They come up with ideas, they say things.
Project 2025. You may have heard the phrase as election season continues. What is it, and why are some sounding the alarm?
Abraham Lincoln said, "You represent yourself, you have a fool for a client."
But representation comes at a cost. The Texas Supreme Court Justice trying to close the justice gap, and his plan to bring legal aid to those struggling in this economy. A deep dive into Project 2025. It's getting the attention of Republicans and Democrats and headlines across the country, especially as we get closer to the November election. The conservative plan calls for a sweeping overhaul of the federal government. Rashad Hudson shares what Project 2025 is.
House Democrats say they are focused on defeating Project 2025.
It's a collection of extreme MAGA ideas.
The Conservative Heritage Foundation is behind the plan. It provides a detailed blueprint for overhauling the federal government. It would restructure employees, policies, and federal agencies, including eliminating the Department of Education. California Democratic Congressman Ted Lieu calls it concerning.
I mean, this document is creepy. It's a takeover of the American form of government.
Over the past week, many Republicans have distanced themselves from Project 2025. Former President Donald Trump said he knows nothing about it. Potential Trump running mate, Ohio Senator J.D. Vance, says the former president has his own plan.
What the media and the Democrats are trying to do is attach its most unpopular elements to the Trump administration. It's a 900-page document. I guarantee there are things that Trump likes and dislikes.
Florida Democratic Congressman Maxwell Frost says he heard from voters about the plan.
They're scared to death of Project 2025 and the far right wing.
Democrats hope Project 2025 will motivate voters to back President Biden. Reporting in Washington, Rashad Hudson.
Hundreds of thousands of civil cases go unrepresented in court every year. One of the barriers in the way? Money. One Texas Supreme Court justice's mission to expand legal aid across the country. Closing the justice gap. Every year, hundreds of thousands of people are denied justice in the civil court system because they can't afford a lawyer. Even though the Sixth Amendment gives people a right to counsel, that only applies to criminal cases. That means low-income Texans often face their legal problems alone. There are programs to help, but they're only available for those under a certain income level. A Texas Supreme Court justice wants to raise that limit. Chief Justice Nathan Hecht was in Washington, D.C. this week speaking with senators about disparities in the civil justice system. Monica Madden sat down with the justice on closing the justice gap.
Legal aid is restricted to people who have no more than 150% of the poverty level, federal poverty level earnings. So it works out to a little bit over the minimum wage.
And I guess, with that being the standard, do you think that needs to be something that is raised so this aid can be accessible to more people?
Absolutely. And sometimes in some programs it can go up to 200%, but that's still a very low income level. And some of these problems fall on people, as you say, who have they're above that. But they don't have income to spend on legal fees, which, as you know, can be very expensive. And it just makes all the difference in the world when you have that kind of assistance, when you have legal assistance.
And what kind of problems does that create for those people who are in need of these services?
It can run the gamut. So, for example, veterans return home and start looking for jobs, maybe homes, maybe their families are stressed. The problems that they have that need to be addressed, and they just don't have any way of doing it. It's, they've been serving their country and they come back and they can't get help. Sexual assault survivors. We've got a big program to provide legal services for them to help them get out of the situations that they've been in. and get back on with their lives.
I'm curious, how you became passionate about this issue. Is this something that you've even seen at the highest level of the Supreme Court, of people not having access to resources to help them?
We don't see it so much in our court. Occasionally, we have someone who's trying to represent themselves, and we have a program to designate a lawyer who will do that in our court. But it's not very often. But in family court, for example, something well over half, maybe 3/4 of the parties in all of the cases in family courts, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of cases a year, don't have a lawyer. In eviction cases, tenants typically don't have lawyers. In debt collection cases, the debtor typically does not have a lawyer. So there are a lot of cases.
Thanks, Monica, and thank you for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Josh Hinkle, and we'll be back next week to bring you an in-depth look at Texas politics.